So I saw this quote that I shared with you last hour from Kevin Durant. And I thought it was kind of interesting that KD says they need me. They, being the media, needs me, right? Essentially what he said was, hey, if not for me being a free agent, none of this would be a big story. And it continues. And look, Chris Broussard joined us last hour. He loves KD. So do I. I was like the first guy a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, to go, hey, Kevin Durant might actually be the best player in this league. And I was shouted down like, what possible information do you have? What footage do you have? How could you possibly say that? I was like, well, we usually say whoever plays the best in the second half of the biggest games of the year, they, if they have regular season MVP, multiple all-star performances, great performances in the past, and they can win on the biggest stage against the best players in the league, I don't know. And if you remember 2 years ago, he outplayed LeBron. And last year, he outplayed LeBron, specifically in the second half. And I love people like, well, LeBron wore down. Again, that doesn't matter. We've always judged people on what they do in the second half of all the big games. And, frankly, the entirety of all the big games. So people are coming around to that argument. Colin Cowherd is like, man, Kevin Durant's the best player in the league. Like, matter of fact, as if he came up with the idea. Like, no. I started talking about it 2 years ago. But alas, others are coming around to it. And then I read this quote, and Broussard joined me last hour, and he was like, man, KD, he just keeps doing this to himself, like pitting himself against the media. Why would he do that? Whether it's a mission of self-exploration, whether he's trying to create kind of his own likeness and image and be the anti-hero, whatever it is, chastising the media for not asking what he thinks are basketball questions. Some of the body language that he puts off is one of aloofness. And his undeniable skill makes me think that I've actually seen all of this before. Who's the greatest player of all time? What's the argument we use? We say, well, Michael Jordan's the GOAT. Or we do LeBron James. And the historic guy goes like, hey, Bill Russell. Or the stat guy goes like, Wilt Chamberlain. These are all good arguments, and they all have reasons, logic behind them. Would scoring points, a ton of points, be a good argument? Well, would winning championships be a good argument? Sure. Would winning MVPs be a good part of the argument? Sure. Would scoring points, winning MVPs, and winning championships, would those all be big things? Yeah. And competing against the best teams in your era time and again? Sure. We never mentioned Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem is a 6-time champion, a 6-time NBA MVP. 6 times. Oh, and he's actually scored more points than anybody else in the history of the game. No, he didn't average as many points and rebounds as Wilt Chamberlain did, but Wilt Chamberlain, the knock against him was always got outplayed by Bill Russell in the big games. There isn't an argument you can make that can't include Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in that discussion. And yet, have you ever been a part of a discussion where people go like, hey, who's part of this discussion is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? No. Oh, and he won 3 straight national championships in college, right? Everywhere he went, they won. And here's the other parts where he's similar to Kevin Durant. I've told people, Kevin Durant, and you've heard me, he has an unblockable shot. He's a 7-footer who shoots the ball high and behind his head. It's Oscar Robertson. Oscar Robertson had the same type of jump shot, only this guy's actually better and taller with longer arms. Do you know when the last unstoppable shot was in the NBA? Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's skyhook. Right? 7'2" with a skyhook that nobody could block because he was a great athlete and used his off arm. Right? It was an unstoppable weapon. You just hoped he missed. Kareem was so good they outlawed dunking in college basketball. That's how good he was. And yet, no one mentions him. You want to know why? Well, there's a bunch of reasons. I would say the first, realistically, he did play a little bit too long, right? Played into his 40s, and he was a bit of a shell. It wasn't quite Muhammad Ali at the end, but he was a shell of his former self. Also, we've forgotten how dominant centers were and how important they were. Think about how many points he scored, and he never hit a three-point shot. Pretty crazy, right? We forget that the ball used to go, NBA basketball used to play inside out. It wasn't just your guy, but another power forward who would help out. You had to play 1-on-2, and he was the best at 1-on-2 that there ever was. But I think the third part is he was never really comfortable in his own skin. He always fought the media. Right? Kareem was... I've actually played for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He was my coach when I played in the USBL. Kareem is brilliant, but his interpersonal skills haven't always been great. Obviously, he grew up amongst people who pointed at him, and he was awkward and kind of uncomfortable. He also read books and was kind of he grew up in a time in which there was still segregation in our country, not where he grew up, but in parts of the country. And he was bright enough to understand just how stupid that was and made it a point to point that out. But he also didn't trust white people. And he had a manager who ran off with a bunch of his money. Like, look, there's a reason why he didn't trust people, but he wasn't trusting of other people. It's the same thing with Kevin Durant. He's not trusting of all people. He's also very, very bright. He doesn't seem comfortable in his own skin. His body language isn't always great. He has an unblockable shot. He pits himself versus the media for no apparent reason, much like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar did. Kareem left Milwaukee after winning a championship for the Bright Lights in Big City and a much more balanced kind of plural community in Los Angeles as opposed to the polarizing black side of town and white side of town of Milwaukee, Wisconsin back in the 70s. Like, there's a lot. Wait a second. Kevin Durant was in Oklahoma City, and now he's in San Francisco or in Oakland. Same guy. I don't know whether or not Kevin Durant will go down as the greatest player of all time, but I know right now he's not even in the argument, and look at his level of complete and total domination. How many times he led the league in scoring? How many times does he have to be the league's MVP, the finals MVP? What more does he have? He has an unblockable shot. He's an unstoppable weapon. He's so good that the New York Knicks think, you know what? Our only way to be relevant is to get Kevin Durant into New York City. We get him, and the rest is easy. Kevin Durant's going down the path of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, which could go down as an all-time great, but just not mentioned as an all-time great. Or could go down as the greatest of all time, but just not mentioned as the greatest of all time. Kind of an amazing thing happened with KD, isn't it? It's like he's too smart for his own good, which is Kareem's problem. Kareem is brilliant, but he's playing he's playing chess when you're playing checkers, right? He wants you to know how smart he is. He wants to have conversations on this supreme elite level about everything when sometimes we just want to scratch ourselves and watch ball on TV. We just want to know, hey, dude, where are you going to go next year? Why aren't you happy here? Why don't you smile more? Clay smiles more. Steph smiles more. You know, Steph's got cool dances. Why you always got to be Debbie Downer? That's the same thing as, do you remember the story about Magic Johnson's first game? Played in Philadelphia. They had a game-winning shot. Magic's hugging Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, hugging him, going crazy. First game of the season. You know what Kareem said? Easy, young buck, we got 81 more. Like, even then, Kareem just couldn't enjoy the joy that Magic played with. Magic is Steph. Same thing. Where they just, there's no one hated watching Magic Johnson play. Magic couldn't shoot. Magic didn't play a ton of defense, but he completely took over a game. Steph turns it over a lot. Steph, they kind of hide him defensively, but you can't stop watching him because he does things like Magic we've just seemingly never seen anybody do at his size before. But think about this. When you think of the greatest player of all time, have you ever thought of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in that discussion? Likelihood is no. And you've definitely never heard any of us idiots on TV talk about it. And when you start to draw a conclusion as to why, think of the things that Kareem would do and how he would act and how uncomfortable he was with the media, with Milwaukee early on, with the attention that he would receive, with his perceived level of intelligence in comparison to others, how he handled himself in the media. And then you look at Kevin Durant. Same guy.